Welcome. This is the third part of a set of presentation on Paul's second missionary journey. We are looking at the journey that goes from Acts 36 to Acts 18:22. This examination is for courses on Greek exegesis. It is historical and geographical context of the Greek text. We are looking today at part 3, which looks at Acts 16, 1 through 6, and the geographical locations. We pick up our story in Tarsus. This is a picture of modern Tarsus with the Roman ruins that are still there, and probably that's where Paul's home in Tarsus was. His family probably had a shop along the main road in the Agora. But as we go with Paul decides to go from there to Derbe and Lystra. Derbe and Lystra is the way you see that. And from there he goes to visit brethren in Lystra and Iconium, which in English is often called Iconium. So we're going to take a look at these cities to see what happens. At this point, Paul also picks up Timothy, who was the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer but whose father was Greek. This would have been common as the Greek settled a great deal of these cities after they were conquered. Now notice as he goes through these cities, he was increasing several cities, not just Lystra and Derbe and Iconium. He was strengthening many cities along the way. As you notice, you have Derbe, where we have a map that shows it goes south toward Derbe to Lystra up to Iconium. But if we look at the actual cities, these are challenging for Paul. Remember, Paul in the first missionary journey went the opposite. He went from Perga on the coast to Antioch in Pisidia, down to Iconium and Lystra. And in each one he preaches and has difficulty. For example, he preaches in Antioch Pisidia, and he preaches, and the first time he's received warmly. The second time it says, "Now the meeting of the synagogue had broken up. Many of the Jews and God-fearing proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who were speaking to them and urging them to continue in the grace of God." That's in Acts 43. In Acts 13, 43. But in Acts 44, you hear that the next Sabbath, nearly the whole city assembled to hear the word of the Lord. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and began to contradict the things spoken by Paul and were blaspheming. In the end, in Acts 50, it says that the Jews incited the devout women of prominence and the leading men in the city to send Paul on. So, where did Paul went from there to Iconium and Lystra? In each of these he had problems. Why do you see him stopping at this? Well, Tarsus, Iconium, and Pisidia had Jewish populations, but there were larger ones, such as Sidon, Damascus near Jerusalem, or Apamea near Antioch, or Ephesus, Perga, Lycia, Pergam, which you probably recognize from Revelations, and Caesarea, Mascara in Cappadocia, and Nihartia in Babylon. But again, we have Paul taking boldness and going back to these cities. As I said, there are two possible routes that one could have gone between Derbe and Lystra. These are the roads as described by Barrington's Barrington's Atlas of the Roman and Greek World. This atlas is based on archaeological research. Now, what probably happened is he went to Derbe, and this lower yellow route has many cities around it. So that would make sense with Luke's reporting that they had done several things. His boldness is that even inside of these cities, as he fled to Lystra, he was actually stoned. So to say he's going to go back to these cities as he did in the first century risks this sort of things. So as he follows his trace backwards, as these arrows show, we find him going first through the Tarsus Mountains, up through the Tarsus Mountains and the gate. Notice that there's a sort of way through these mountains that is following perhaps a small river or a small stream, but it goes to the rivers. Up here is what Derby looks like after you get through the mountains, probably looking back at the mountains. This is you can find this on Bible Places, this picture on BiblePlaces.com. You see there's just a mountain, and many times archaeologically they find the city, but after the cities have been no longer there, there's just basically the trash mound that goes from there. Now, as you go into Lystra, where he was stoned, you see that you have, and recall that Lystra, the reason Paul was stoned is he healed a man who had not walked from birth. Then the people who, then it says, when the crowds in Acts 14:11, the crowds had seen what Paul has done, they raised their voice in Lycaonian language, saying, "The gods have become like men and come down to us." They began calling Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was outside the city of Lystra, brought oxen and garlands to the gates and wanted to offer sacrifices with the crowds. But when Paul and Barnabas heard of it, they tore their robes and said, "Men, why are you doing this? We are also men of the same nature, and preach you a gospel that you should return from these vain things to a living God." So when Paul finishes with this, the crowd settles down. But then the Jews again come from Antioch and Lystra. Antioch in Pistia, or Pistian Antioch is what we would say in English, and come to Lystra and win over the leading women and crowds. And remember, this was a very stratified city. If the wealthy people were upset, oftentimes you were escorted out of town. As you go to Lystra, we'll see what that looks like. Here again is what I'll call the trash mound for Lystra. You see that it has, it's much more a plains area, and you would have a road. Now, was this dirt area just Roman road? We don't really know. Sometimes the Roman roads are there, and you can see in Lystra where some of the roads are looking as you walk through all the pieces. But perhaps there are other pieces where they're doing this. Now, they went from Lystra to Antioch Pistia, and again you going down probably through Iconium and down this long road through some set of mountains and then into Pistia, which is at the hills. We will, here is Antioch and Pistia. You can see the mountains in the background and the Roman road still there, which is amazing that you still have some ruins after this. As he goes forward out of that, he will go to Antioch. He will go to Phrygia and Galatia, and we will pick that up in part 5 of these presentations. Thank you.